so that Ukraine comes and goes, being satisfied.
They are trying to give a more beautiful Rapa today, but you should not expect real movements in this direction. Because Sweden and Finland are the closest relatives, they are family members. And you are not even distant relatives. Biden has no success today. Any change related to the White House will show a crisis. There are no such terms in politics, endless friendship. Divide and govern. You see, there are so many goats inside. Everyone makes money on the topic of Ukraine. Everyone makes money on the topic of the Middle East. Everyone, to one extent or another, today is somehow tied to the same Russia. You know, politics, it's not like you have to be on the same side. But even China, when it allows itself something that the Kremlin does not like, you will never hear something so anti-Chinese, because this is China.
Hello, Mr. Yunus. I am glad to welcome you. You see, we are already meeting on your territory for the first time in a long time.
Greetings, thank you for the invitation. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to our heroes. In fact, if we start our interview with the situation that is now happening in Washington, then the central topic of discussion is still the question of whether Biden will go to the polls or not. Will he withdraw his candidacy, as even many supporters urge him, or will he still insist on his decision to stay? And the NATO summit, which, in fact, I attended, can also be perceived in the context of Biden's election campaign and how he will show himself there, as the leader of probably the strongest side of the alliance. From Ukraine's perspective, I've heard that the Biden administration is now trying to do everything it can to get Ukraine to come and go, satisfied. Speaking of your observations, what do you think we will get from this summit in the end?
Your question, it is so multifaceted, so the personal fate of Biden himself, the election campaign, plus the topic of Ukraine and the NATO summit itself, are connected here, so a huge number of interested parties are involved, both within the United States of America and the NATO countries themselves, which will also gather here. And then you notice, Ukraine stands apart here. And all of them, to one degree or another, are interested in their own fate, both in personal and state terms. The topic of Ukraine also affects them to one degree or another. Therefore, let's start with Biden. As for his participation or non-participation, this issue today is one of the most acute in the political discourse here in the United States of America. And you will see the decision on it in the near future. I think we need to wait for the Republican Party convention, when it will be clear who will go to Donald Trump's vice president. And if it is Nikki Haley, it will be a very strong step on the part of the Republican Party. And so the Democrats are kind of knocked down today after what happened after this debate. And this discussion, which has been hidden for a whole year, has now come to the surface. It is no longer possible to drive it back inside. Prominent representatives of the lower house of Congress, senators, are already talking about this. There are a lot of discussions in the media and in the media of the Democratic Party. Therefore, this topic stands apart. Nothing has been decided yet. There have been a lot of speakers from the Democratic Party who also demand that he get out of this race. Naturally, today no one can say anything clearly on this topic. The topic of Kamala Harris has already become relevant. It has also begun to appear on the agenda, and on the other hand, the topic of the Republican Party will be in the next few weeks. Now, as for the NATO summit itself, the NATO summit, as you can see, is one of the moments in the foreign policy of the United States of America. Biden has no success in foreign policy today, neither in the Russian-Ukrainian direction, nor in the Middle East. And therefore, naturally, and for more than 2 years, the reaction to this war, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, so toothless at the very beginning, of course, does not give any dividends, political loans, and therefore some kind of success is needed. And therefore, you rightly noted in your question, that he will try to get some kind of dividend from this here at the NATO summit. Whether it will work or not, we will notice this in the coming days, but I think there is a trend towards this.
Let's go back a little more. You said about Kamala Harris, on the one hand, the media wrote at the beginning, literally after these debates, which were disastrous for Biden, that she had a very low rating, that she would not be able to win, especially such a candidate as Donald Trump. But on the other hand, you say that now more and more people are talking about it, discussing it. Do you think she has a real chance of defeating a real candidate like Donald Trump?
You know, when we talk about ratings, it's all propaganda. This is all propaganda, and America is so polarized today in the institutions of power, where the legislative, executive and judicial powers, plus the fourth power are the media. Definitely, half are Republican, half are Democratic. Therefore, public opinion polls, and regarding these ratings, they are all tendentious. Therefore, naturally, just the tactic that the Democrats have chosen from the very beginning of Joe Biden's cadence was that he is ahead, she does not appear. She does not appear, and therefore we have not heard or seen her for almost these 4 years. And that is why her rating is at that level. And how can a person's rating be higher or lower if a person does not appear anywhere at all? Understand? Because she was not given in advance. She is younger, she is still a woman. She still has certain Asian roots. Therefore, these are all such moments that could affect the strengthening of her rating. America is ready for this. Another thing is that they did not work on this. And now, 3 to 4 months before the elections, it is very difficult to do all this, of course, to promote it. If this had been done a year ago, it is quite realistic. But a year ago, this was not done, because the bet was on Joe Biden. Therefore, based on what is being said today, this is ordinary speculation. But with all the options, if Joe Biden has to be replaced, definitely, according to the Constitution, the second candidate is Kamala Harris. There can be no other options here. Precisely because who will they nominate? It turns out that they themselves do not trust Kamala Harris. Then it turns out that she is a dummy. That is, in this situation, the topic of Kamala Harris is definitely becoming relevant every day. We will see how relevant it will become in the next month. And it is precisely depending on how the Republican Party convention goes that the agenda of the Democratic Party, which meets in August, will be approved.
The fact that Biden is now being criticized from all sides, both his own and others, and opponents, how do you think this affects his policy towards Ukraine?
Definitely, everything that is happening does not add to his authority or rating. It hits in all directions. And as for his body movement in one direction or another, he has to do something that he has not done before, for example. And so, naturally, I think that everything that is happening here in the United States of America, especially in speculation, the topic of Ukraine, remember the 6-month marathon here in Congress, and the topic of Ukraine, and the topic of Israel, how speculative they were, and they make money on it, and Ukraine makes money on it, and Israel. No matter how paradoxical it may sound, because if this topic is in the black, it means that everyone will tear their shirts for Ukraine, for Israel. If this topic is in the red, then they will distance themselves. Today, both of these topics are in the black. The Israeli theme is even much stronger, but the Ukrainian topic also continues to remain in political discourse at the appropriate level. Therefore, I have no doubt that the NATO summit will be stronger even than the summit in Vilnius regarding the topic of Ukraine, because today they must create some kind of mechanism, as they say, in order to neutralize the fool. Sometimes there are situations in life in order not to become a hostage of some situation. Donald Trump or someone else will come. Therefore, the mechanism of such a political institution as NATO should work in such a way that the change of power in the White House does not affect this. And it is the dynamic since last summer, the fact that Europe has been in motion, that is a clear confirmation of this. Therefore, the devil is not as terrible as he is painted, if you look at it from the point of view of Ukraine. I don't see much fear if Biden stays here, and I don't see much fear if Donald Trump comes.
If we are talking about expectations from this summit, there are several points that are worth dwelling on. The first is political. On the one hand, we are no longer waiting for a direct invitation to Ukraine to join NATO, but, of course, this is a very important issue for us. And Biden, in an interview with a journalist earlier, stated that about a month ago or a little more, that he had never been a supporter of Ukraine's accession to NATO in principle. But after that, on the sidelines of the G7, he signed a bilateral security agreement with Zelensky, which says that this document is a kind of bridge for Ukraine's accession to NATO. What do you think is Biden's real policy? And if he stays on the next term, will we see Ukraine's accession? Is it possible for Ukraine to join NATO under the Biden administration?
This is not the real policy of Biden. This is the real policy of the United States of America. There is a bipartisan attitude here precisely to not rush into this process. I don't want us to personify here, because before that we saw the presence of Republicans in the administration. We saw the presence of Democrats in the administration. And the topic of Ukraine, as well as the topic of Georgia, has been on the agenda since 2008. And, to be honest, she didn't even move an inch. If not this war, if not Russia's aggression against Georgia in 2008, if not the aggression after 2014 against you, they definitely did not talk about this topic at all. And this full-scale aggression moved a little 2 years ago, and therefore today they are trying to give a more beautiful wrapper, to come up with something on this whole topic. You should not expect real movements in this direction. The best thing you can expect is to give us at least so many weapons that we can defend ourselves until the moment when this hour of X comes, when the topic of our reception will be the same as the topic of Sweden and Finland. It's just that Sweden and Finland are the closest relatives, they are family members, and you are not even distant relatives. Therefore, this must be understood. And do not deceive yourself to expect today that there will be some specific statements that you will be accepted. Another thing is that a good result will be if some fateful decisions are made here, so that Europe itself, autonomously, would not be very dependent on the umbrella of the United States of America in military, technical and financial terms. In principle, this was provoked by the same Donald Trump. Let's be honest. If this baton were not over Europe, that I will not defend you if you do not finance this case yourself. And then the aggression of Russia against you added gasoline to this. And note that then they began to move, and the money was found, and the military-industrial complex began to work. Therefore, from this side, you simply win. If this decision is simply made here, to give you as many weapons as necessary, then it will be in accordance with the paper that Ukraine signs with the United States of America and other countries. These papers are not that they will go to war for you, and they will give soldiers there. But they quite openly state that they are ready to finance you with both money and weapons. And if this is somehow enshrined even more strongly here, then I will consider it a success for Ukraine.
Now we understand that it is important for Biden not to repeat the situation that was last year. You said that, on the one hand, we should probably expect even more than we had in Vilnius. In Vilnius last year, I also worked on the sidelines of the summit. I remember a situation when the Ukrainian president, the Ukrainian authorities publicly demanded a political invitation to NATO. And Zelensky even threatened that he would not go to the NATO summit if there was no such invitation for Ukraine. As a result, this caused a lot of disparity among partners and allies. And now it is important for Biden to make sure that this does not happen again. And we have already seen publications in the media that the Ukrainian authorities will not insist on a political invitation, but in return, Ukraine wants more weapons. Patriots are now being actively discussed, and it is also possible that the United States will directly transfer its F-16s to us. What do you think about all this? Can we really demand now? Well, not exactly demand, but hope to get much more?
If you ask me about big politics, about my life experience, how to act, the more aggressive you are, the more you are reckoned with. The stronger you are, the more independent you are, the more you are considered. You should not be an object of international politics, but you should show your subjectivity. That is, give me a weapon. Okay, I will defend myself even better. If you don't give me a weapon, I'll defend myself without your weapons, but I won't give up. What you are telling me is to go to negotiations. Third, fourth, I will not do this. And the more firmly you stand in this situation, the more you will be reckoned with. My native Azerbaijan did not make concessions for 30 years. They were under pressure. Let's go to negotiations. 5 districts, 2 districts. The fact that for 10 years you have been under pressure under the Minsk agreements, what you hear regularly today. Therefore, if you stand firm on this, and the aggressive policy of your government, your president in Vilnius has yielded results, and I think it is necessary to continue this policy. Another thing is if they agreed behind the scenes that it is also normal to publicly avoid such raids. In big politics, this is always allowed. The only thing is that if they agreed behind the scenes, you don't run in, and we will make the decisions you need here. I am referring specifically to the supply of weapons. For Ukraine today, number one is not NATO membership, because you should not expect NATO membership in the near future. Do not deceive yourselves. Today I think that number one is the supply of weapons, not just weapons, but the most necessary lethal, long-range, air defense, everything that will help you not only defend yourself well, but go on the attack. And if there are specific decisions on this topic, specific agreements, words, I say again, this will be the success of this NATO summit and Ukraine's participation in this event.
There is also little information about this now, but nevertheless, the creation of a new organization, an alternative to Ramstein, is being discussed, in case Donald Trump comes to power in the United States. We understand that then the policy of the United States would really change a lot, most likely regarding the Ukrainian-Russian war. And now we understand that then this format of Ramstein, which is now basically coordinating all military assistance to Ukraine, may really be under threat. What do you think about this? What alternative can there be?
I do not think that they will follow this path here, because any alternative to Ramstein is an alternative to NATO. If they gather here at the NATO summit, a jewelry summit, if at this summit they are going to make fateful decisions regarding support for Ukraine, and then they will outline a circle where everything will take place within the framework of Ramstein or within the framework of some other institution that they themselves will create, because any change related to the White House will show a crisis in relations. And this is always not good. It is always not good. And it is no coincidence that Mitt Romney will be the new General Secretary. Many do not know this. Mitt Romney was the same person who, in 2018, helped resolve some of the difficulties in relations between NATO and the United States of America during the time of Donald Trump, the President of the United States. Therefore, if Mitt Romney is the General Secretary today, and he will already be, the issue has already been resolved. This says a lot. This means that they are looking at the prospect of relations between this NATO, just in case, if the administration suddenly changes here. Therefore, I do not see any big problems in terms of what Europe has been doing since last summer, and in all directions it is going, like the European Union, like NATO, along the line of the fact that if suddenly some policy here in the United States changes, then it is necessary to make sure that this does not affect Europe itself and those goals so much. And the challenges and risks facing Europe today. Therefore, I think Europe calculates all these options in the same way.
Friends, while I urge you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, it is very important for its promotion. As you can see, today I am in Washington, and I will cover the NATO summit here, all the most important statements, all the most important agreements that will be reached here. I will definitely talk about this. So stay with us. In any case, Mr. Yunus, no matter what happens here, we understand that this summit is attracting attention from all over the world, without exaggeration. And this summit is also symbolic. It is a Jubilee summit. 75 years ago, 12 countries signed the Washington Treaty on Collective Security. And a lot has changed since then. The Soviet Union collapsed, NATO expanded, and for some reason, the members of the alliance decided that perhaps the storm had disappeared. But, nevertheless, now Russia is already waging war in Europe, and in NATO doctrinal documents, Russia is the main enemy, and China is the main challenge, was looking for a Russian analogue of this Ukrainian word. I would like to ask you whether the Allies will really be able to show at this summit that NATO remains the strongest military alliance on the planet.
And they have no other options, because what has happened now in the SCO is happening. You have seen how the whole world is being reformatted. Everyone is preparing for this in one form or another, and, of course, so far neither the SCO, nor BRICS, nor any other institutions can be compared with either NATO or the European Union, including institutionally. But if we want to see trends, then we understand that today I do not see alternatives to NATO. I mean the military political bloc of the West, either from the outside or within them. And so, if they create something new from within, this, on the contrary, will hit the image. They, on the contrary, will follow the path of strengthening. In principle, what you saw, one of the successes, for example, of what can be attributed to the current administration, is that they managed to consolidate NATO, plus the aggression itself, this fear that came to Europe, and they understand that today they have no other options but to stick together. Therefore, I do not think that anything will change. It's just that the challenges they face may have been underestimated by them at the very beginning. Plus, when there was a bipolar world, then everything was clear. Here was the Soviet Union. Here was the United States of America, and the Soviet Union created its institutions, the Warsaw Pact, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, and here there was a common market and NATO. And then this bipolar world worked at the very least. There were some rules. Once the USSR tried to violate these rules, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it was also resolved. Now there are no such rules, you see. There is no new world now, and therefore neither the United Nations nor any international institutions are working. Individual institutions of the same kind cannot react either. Therefore, from within, Russia, the same China, primarily Russia, which has been working powerfully with Europe over these 20 years, divide and rule. You can see how many goats there are inside, who influence the European Union, NATO, and information policy. And we have recently seen elections to the European Parliament, elections in this or that country. They are clear evidence of this. Therefore, of course, in order to understand the extent to which the level of this disease has entered there, these metastases that have entered there over these 30 years of unresolved resolution, perhaps they needed some kind of full-scale war, because in August 2008 they did not reach them in Georgia. In 2014, they didn't get it either. They drove this problem inside. And now the metastases of this problem, the unresolved what could have been solved after 1991, they have come out with their own eyes. And now, whether they want it or not, they have to decide. And those who are not involved in this process are also engaged in this, as if within the framework of BRICS, as if within the framework of the scope. There are a huge number of countries that do not want to participate in this confrontation, especially between China and the United States of America. There are countries that work with both the United States of America and China, including Brazil and Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, Brazil is a member of the BRICS, Brazil is on excellent terms with America. And therefore, when we see this, it is not such a tough confrontation as during the Soviet Union and the United States. This is the forerunner of a multipolar world, because I don't think there will be a bipolar world. But it becomes a fact. Everyone around the United States is still spinning, but now there are trends that others have begun to strengthen, primarily the European Union. And everyone began to revolve around China. Look, the countries that are gathering there are quite ambitious. Many of them are nuclear powers. The same India, the same Pakistan. They are at war with each other. They do not love each other. But they both came and participate in the scope, because they are united by some misunderstanding and disagreement with many points of the European Union, the same NATO. Therefore, there is a reformatting. This is not a problem of one day, 1 year. Such an unresolved, long-term, 30-year-old, something had to blow up this abscess. Here is your war, the last one. It finally blew up this abscess, and willy-nilly they will do it today. At first, they didn't even want to do it, until you ran into it, until you gave up. And it is precisely because of this that you did not give up that they have to decide today, even out of fear. And therefore, when you decide out of fear, you, on the contrary, drive this fear. The more you do it, stand and not give up, the better. That's how it is in my understanding. Because if you give up, you will be the first to blink. Instantly there will be 1,000 countries in the West, including those that will immediately betray you. This is the law. Look, everything that those who have been talking about negotiations for 2 years are doing in the West today. The Minsk agreements exist in key countries, in Germany, in France, and in Italy. They are everywhere. They have not disappeared anywhere. It's just that today it is somehow irrelevant, and it still rests on you, on your endurance. That is, how much you will stand. Therefore, if you stand firm, then they will protect you. We have such a saying in the East: only those who can defend themselves are protected. If you surrender, then they will say, and if they surrender, what do we have to defend? So these are the rules of big politics.
Indeed, friends, the stronger we stand, including, first of all, I would say, on the battlefield, the more we can dictate, probably, even some conditions. And in order for us to stand very firmly on the battlefield, I, as always, urge you to support our army. Friends, in this video there will be a collection for drones for the 57th Brigade. This is the brigade that repelled the Russian offensive in May in the north of our Kharkiv region. And now, in order to develop some of the local successes that our fighters already have, drones are very much needed. Drones help a lot. Therefore, I urge you to join this fundraiser with any comfortable amount. There is a link to Monobank. There are direct card details. PayPal for whom it is more convenient. I will even leave the crypto wallet. Maybe we have those among our viewers who will find it more convenient to donate and support our army in this way. Indeed, we are now seeing how things are changing a lot in our world. Even those countries that used to be more American-oriented, they are also rebuilding, including Hungary. Orbán Putin recently flew to both Ukraine and Russia. He spoke about his services as a mediator in the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. But there he said an interesting thing that, of course, he does not have the opportunity to promote any peace plans. It acts in the interests of more global countries. Here I mean, of course, China and also the United States. And we understand that in the United States, Orbán, he, of course, is a supporter of Trump and, most likely, expects that Trump will win the next election. Do you think Orbán's trip could be such a sketch for future negotiations after the elections in the United States?
No, again, I am not in favor of considering the activities of any particular politician, whoever he is. We should leave sympathy and antipathy in the examination. I notice a lot of information field in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine. When they talk, for example, about this war, they always proceed from whether we like this politician or not, how he treats our country. This is incorrect experimentation. It's like a doctor. He may like or dislike the patient, but he must make the correct diagnosis. And the other thing, what does he think of this patient? Just like here, regarding the same Orbán. Yes, you are right. Orbán is a supporter of Donald Trump. But Orbán, first of all, is his supporter. He is the Prime Minister of his country. And he proceeds from the interests of himself. He is a long liver in politics. You see how he holds power in the country. And he works exactly wherever possible. He will take in order to strengthen political credit and his authority. And so today he received for 6 months for another time. This is the second time. He was 10 years ago, I think, once in this position. This is how the quota changes. And during these 6 months he wants to earn, so to speak, more meat, so to speak, political, for himself. Where can he get it? Everyone makes money on the topic of Ukraine. Everyone will make money on the topic of the Middle East. That is why, depending on the geography where you work, and he works in the geography closer to you, of course, he wants to earn meat. And he has a position today. He will be in this position for 6 months, and he can represent the European Union. As he understands, so he does. You see how immediately the attack came from the European Union, and he introduces himself. He doesn't give a damn about it. He is the Prime Minister of Hungary, and he can, as the Prime Minister of Hungary, come to Kyiv, talk with Zelensky. Publicly, he said publicly, Zelensky said no, went to Moscow. The picture is such that today we are all talking about this topic, what they talked about there. But I have no doubt that these meetings are completely unrealistic, that is, they have no practical significance. It's just that he saw one, heard him. He told the other. They hate each other. The President of Russia, the President of Ukraine, they are fighting. Naturally, a person who sees with one and the other can convey some of these nuances. And that's it, no more, no less. And the fact that Donald Trump will come here tomorrow may increase the importance of Orbán. But I don't think that someone, somewhere can be solved outside of Ukraine. Because it is clearly visible. Because Zelensky, his team, and Ukrainian society as a whole have put everything at stake today. Because otherwise, why would they have fought for 2.5 years? You fought, and today you are in a better situation than you were at the very beginning of the war, when everyone was preparing for a blitzkrieg, that the Kyiv, Sumy, Chernihiv regions would fall, and today this is not the case. Today you understand that if you have more weapons, more opportunities, and you will have more success. Another thing is that you need to convince your allies of this. And on the other hand, Russia, which does not have enough resources, they understand that this will not last Russia in the long term. Russia has neither the money nor the resources for this. Iran and North Korea are not at that level, and China will not be involved, because China's direct involvement is a direct confrontation with the West and with the European Union and the United States. And he trades with them for $1.5 trillion. China needs it. Therefore, we will hear a lot of this in the information field. And in real politics, it will all be just as speculative as long as you stand on your feet. As soon as you blink, then it becomes real. Then they will begin to put it into practice. In the meantime, you do not give any reason for this. The topic of negotiations, first of all, depends on Kyiv, and not on Washington, not on Beijing.
This is interesting. Also Erdogan and an interesting NATO country, Turkey. On the one hand, it combines some Western policy, but at the same time some values of the Asian worldview. And here I want to ask you, Erdogan also met with the leader of China the day before, at the SCO summit. He said that there is a risk now, in fact, of the war escalating into World War III, but later, when he already talked to a journalist, he also said, he hinted that it was as if it was the fault of the West, because he says says that it is the Western countries that are now adhering to approaches that actually contribute to this. Therefore, I want to ask you, what goal is Erdogan pursuing now? And why, when he offered his services as an intermediary in the Kremlin, they abruptly refused?
The fact is that Turkey, like all countries, thinks about its own interests. As you rightly noted, we are a member of the Western community, one of the most leading members of NATO. And, on the other hand, Turkey is in quite pragmatic relations with all the others. That is, it is reckoned with in Russia, it is reckoned with in China, it is reckoned with in Washington and in the European Union. And therefore, it is no coincidence that from the very beginning of this war, Turkey was chosen as a mediator in the humanitarian spheres. And, if you remember, it was a request from Moscow, Kyiv, Washington and the United Nations. And he has achieved quite a lot of success in this area. But this topic is a little irrelevant on the agenda today. That is, the humanitarian topic has receded. I mean the topic of the grain contract. But the topic of prisoners and everything else continues. This topic that we are talking about negotiations, is not relevant today. And the fact that today the weight category of Turkey is not the weight category of China or the United States of America. Read exactly this in the words of the President of Turkey, and read the same in the words of the President of Russia. When the topic of negotiations comes on the agenda, and it becomes relevant unequivocally, this should be decided by the main countries on the planet. One should stand behind Ukraine, the other should stand behind Russia. That is, those whom they can trust and delegate, in this regard. Behind Ukraine is the United States, behind Russia can only be China. Because Russia can listen not to Turkey, it can listen to a country that is stronger than it, you know. And China is definitely stronger than Russia today, both in material and technical terms, as in military terms, financially, economically, in all directions. Therefore, in geopolitical too. Therefore, this is far from accidental. The SCO, which was originally closer to the same Russia, today the SCO revolves around the same China. And the opposition of Turkey is frank. Turkey, being a member of the Western community, protects its interests. Because look at the geography where Turkey is located. Turkey is located between Europe and Asia. Turkey is in the Muslim world. The Muslim world is not so homogeneous. There are Shiites in Iran, which does not like Turkey. Therefore, there are many problems that really exist today. And to be in this geography and definitely take some side, this is wrong. But look at the issues on which Turkey is positioned. If we are talking about Ukraine, Turkey has been on your side since 2014. That is, Turkey is the first country to supply you with weapons, before anyone else in NATO, including the United States of America. Turkey has been next to the Crimean platform from the first day, next to you. And the level of relations between Turkey and Ukraine, there is both open and closed information, and for this it is enough to look at the personal relations between President Zelensky and President Erdogan. Therefore, with all this, Turkey, mind you, has fairly normal relations with Russia, although they have cooled down a little recently, especially after the elections in Turkey, when even the visit of the Russian president was postponed, because Turkey's position in the Western direction has strengthened, as you can see. Turkey's relations with the European Union and the United States have also improved. And Turkey has opened the green light for both Sweden and Finland, that is, to NATO. Therefore, you know, politics, it is not such that you should be on the same side. I can unequivocally say today that the unidirectional foreign policy of any country depends on the geography where it is located. If you are in the center of Europe, then it is clear that you must be a member of the European Union, NATO, and you must be engaged in this policy. But if you are in such a geography when there are diverse countries around, for example, such as Turkey, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, you cannot bet on one country. Because if you bet on one country, it will not get involved, and you will become a hostage of that situation. Georgia is Saakashvili's one-vector policy, and Saakashvili is in prison, and Georgia, do you see in what situation? Because it does not trust Moscow, it is afraid of Moscow. And it does not trust Europe, she it not fit in for them. Therefore, when we want to understand this or that policy of this or that country and such large regional powers as Turkey, we must always look at the geography where all this is located. And through the prism of this geography, then we can correctly assess the relations between Turkey and Ukraine. I think Turkey is one of the few countries in Europe that has the best attitude towards Ukraine. Therefore, we need to look at the numbers, and not at the information that we sometimes have to say. Because the military-industrial complex of Ukraine today is very much tied to Turkey, because they are developing cooperation. On many points, because you do not forget Crimea, you do not forget the Crimean Tatars, do not forget this topic. Therefore, Turkey is unequivocally on your side in this matter, because international law is on your side. And this topic is perhaps one of the foundations, the basis in your relations with Turkey. Therefore, use it to the fullest as well.
And what is happening in the relationship between Putin and Erdogan? And I repeat, why has the Kremlin now rejected Turkey's proposal to be a mediator again? Because Turkey has already performed such a role more than once, or tried to fulfill it.
The weight category of Turkey does not provide this opportunity. Russia is not just refusing to do so or putting it in a rude way. It understands perfectly well that Turkey does not have levers of influence on Russia, those that the United States and China have, for example. But the United States cannot be a partner of Russia in this matter. This means that Russia's partner should be someone whom Russia chooses today. If at the very beginning of this war, Russia, being confident in its blitzkrieg, agreed to the role of Turkey in humanitarian issues, then it acted from a position of strength. And now it cannot act from a position of strength from the fact that they say the same demands as it was 2.5 years ago, these territories and everything else. That is, the requirements are the same, but the situation is different, diametrically different. And therefore, in this situation, they need a strong ally in the negotiation process. And this strong ally is not Turkey, this strong ally, first of all, China.
Friends, so that you understand, it's 37 degrees outside in Washington now. Therefore, from this terrible heat, we hid in the premises of the Senate, in the Senate premises, in the buildings of Congress. And here I propose to continue with the topic of what happened on the sidelines of the SCO summit in the context of relations, including between Russia and China. And the local media, analyzing this summit, wrote that now the competition between Moscow and Beijing is increasing, just against the background of the fact that Moscow is losing its positions in Central Asia because of the war that has been going on for a very long time, because it is bogged down in this war, and is increasingly dependent on China. And China at this time is trying to very quickly increase its influence, in fact, as if in the backyard of Russia, as it was previously thought. And now even the Wall Street Journal has come out of the headline, "From boundless friendship to enmity." What do you think? Indeed, what is happening in these relations now? Can this be called, properly speaking, enmity or competition? And how can this affect Beijing's further support for Moscow at all?
There are no such terms in politics, endless friendship. Therefore, even in the days of the Soviet Union and China, it was there that Stalin and Mao Zedong did not have such a thing. Therefore, there have always been interests. And if at a certain moment the interests of China and the Soviet Union were very close, but then, you remember, they began to fight for Damansky Island. And it is precisely these two large geographies, the United States of America, that have always been used as a deterrent factor. China was used against the Soviet Union, and then, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia was used against China. In the 70s, this turned out to be the fact that Taiwan and China were swapped places in the Security Council. The Americans did it, and after that, this Chinese miracle was born. Now the Americans want to contain this Chinese miracle that they themselves created, this monster. Because when you count on one thing, but it turns out a little differently, the political situation changes. And so it is very difficult to calculate all this strategically, as if they did everything right, won the Cold War, but what next? And then, you see, the last 30-odd years of wrong, so to speak, policy, the unresolved many problems have led to the turbulent situation that we have on the planet today. And when, as I said, it exploded, this whole abscess, everyone was quietly moving towards it. And the Kremlin was moving towards this, and China, and the whole world was preparing to one degree or another. Especially, I mean large such powers. And if Russia at the very beginning, it had certain tactics, the tactics of the United States, for example, not to interfere in the affairs of Europe. The United States delegated all issues of this geography in relations with Russia to the Germans, French, and Italians. And the Germans, the French, the Italians made a deal with the Kremlin. And for 20 years, as you can see, they have been making a lot of money. 14 packages of sanctions, and billions are still dripping. And, of course, this was used as a deterrent against China by the same Americans. But when the situation changed dramatically, when the full-scale aggression began, remember, these three prime ministers who, the Chancellor, the President of France and the Prime Minister of Italy, came to Moscow, and they said that you were shooting yourself in the foot, you were ruining our business. And he said that the Americans would swallow this too, as it would have been in 2008 to 2014. But you did not swallow it. That is, you forced both the Americans and everyone else to change the agenda. And when this began to happen, you will notice what China's position was. China sat like a boa constrictor on a tree for a whole year and watched all this. And the weakening of the United States, the weakening of Russia is beneficial to China. And as they weakened, China's importance increased. Remember how China announces its peace plan a year later, and everyone started talking about it. And quietly, look at how China slowly but surely made it so that both Russia and all those structures in which Russia was the initiator, whether it is BRICS, whether it is the SCO, they are now revolving around China, and those other countries that in one way or another do not want to be tied to one vector foreign policy, be it the European Union, NATO, or whether it is BRICS and the same SCO. Turkey is from the same category. For example, Brazil is from the same category. That is, large such players. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, note that there are only a few states there, and today their number has reached 10. Of course, it is not BRICS. Look where Brazil is, where China is. This is not the European Union at all. And the difference between BRICS and the SCO, unlike the European Union and NATO, is that the European Union and NATO have already institutionally passed, and they already exist. Bad, poor, bad, good, that's another matter, but they exist. Plus, they are united by values. For the most part, they are Christian countries, with a few exceptions. They are all Christian countries. So many say it is a Christian club. So Turkey is not accepted into the European Union. NATO is accepted, but not accepted into the European Union. They have common values, a common geography, and they managed to establish it as an institution. And it turns out like the United States of Europe, the United States of America, and this is the United States of Europe. Moreover, the Americans were moving towards this after World War II. And here this process does not yet exist, but the very trend of this process, we can say as if there is, but again, these are their values, where Pakistan and India, they hate each other, they are fighting, how can they unite? But it's another matter, it's the SCO, it's money, it's logistics, it's the economy, it's just that in this situation, willy-nilly, what is happening in the world suggests that politics will also be present here, but they are not there to fight against America. That's how they want to present it. No, because all those who are there, they trade with the same America, with that Europe, led by the same China. It's just that Russia today finds itself in a certain situation. This paradigm has changed a little. The West is closing itself off to Russia. And when the West closes down, it means that the West makes it so that Russia diversifies its entire economy towards the East, towards China. And China, one road, one belt, is their program for more than $1 trillion. And here there is a great need for this middle corridor. And this middle corridor connects China on one side and ends with the European Union. And therefore, what we see, for example, in the SCO, does not mean that China's goods will go further. They should reach Europe. And how will they reach Europe if the border with Russia is closed? This means that they will go to the middle corridors. This is Kazakhstan, this is Uzbekistan, so they are represented in the SCO. This is Azerbaijan, so Azerbaijan went there. This is Turkey, so Turkey is there. You see, you just need to look at geography. When we say geopolitics, geo is geography. Many people are not interested in geography, and like it or not, we say it is sympathy, antipathy. The same Lukashenko who came there, he came for a reason. Lukashenko has been in power for 30 years, we like him or not, he is long-lived. Before that he flirted with the same West, when there was Yeltsin and the same West, then with the same Kremlin and butted heads at certain moments. But today he is completely tied to the Kremlin. And since you are tied to the Kremlin, on this side are Russia, on the other side are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and China, of course, works very closely with them. Do you think Xi Jinping is meeting with Lukashenko just like that? Xi Jinping has signed a strategic partnership with my native Azerbaijan. It is the second country in the South Caucasus after Georgia. And why? And just imagine, Azerbaijan's strategic partnership with China, and the strategic partnership was signed last summer with the European Union, led by Ursula von der Leyen. That is, Ursula von der Leyen and the European Union here, China here. Why did little Azerbaijan sign? Because it is the main center. Everything will go through Azerbaijan. This means that China will protect these investments, these logistics, and the European Union will protect them. This is a multi-vector foreign policy, you see? And with all this, Azerbaijan has excellent relations with Ukraine. In the post-Soviet space, we are number one in humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Plus, we are in the Crimean platform. Your territorial integrity. That is, we fully support you. But this is not our war, this is not our weight category. And on the other hand, we have pragmatic relations with Russia. We managed to neutralize them. We have pragmatic relations with Iran. We managed to neutralize them. They don't like us. They have been tearing up my country for 200 years. But again, we managed to neutralize them somehow. Therefore, there is no need to look for enemies. There will be enemies anyway. We need to look for friends. And here is the presence of some countries in the SCO, I mean specifically my native Azerbaijan, from this category. As for when it was originally around Russia, now they are revolving around China. But to say that this will be an alternative to America, this will be an alternative to the European Union, is nonsense for a fairly simple reason. We need to look at the subject plane, at the money that is circulating between China and the European Union. After all, what is all the logistics for? To go somewhere, to be sold somewhere. China will go into confrontation with the European Union, and then it will trade with it, which means that China is not interested in this. I would like us to understand what the SCO is and why they meet there. Each country has its own interests. The same China approaches this in a completely different way, not in the same way as the same Russia. Russia is simply trying to present this as an anti-Western club. Everyone gathered there and all those who support Russia gathered. But, my dear, look at the dry remnants of these 2.5 years of this war. Which of them really supported the same Russia? Did they trade economically? So the European Union trades with them today. The European Union trades even more than many countries, all those that are present in the SCO.
But many countries, like China, support Russia, and studies show how much trade is growing in dual-use goods, which Russia uses to develop its army and continue, in fact, aggression against Ukraine.
I will immediately object to this argument that you are saying. Over these 2.5 years, the trade turnover between China and Russia has increased by 100 billion. It was 140 billion, now it is 240 billion. The trade turnover between the European Union and Russia was more than $1 trillion. Before a full-scale war. Now look at what level. Billions are also traded. Invite an economic specialist, and not only in the field of nuclear technology, there is uranium. Uranium is still being supplied today, and much more. What do you think? The 14th package, they say the 15th package, the 16th package. This means that all this is still dripping. Therefore, when you compare it, you will see that it is not the way they are trying to present it to us. Europe, the West, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Central Asia. That is, everyone today is somehow tied to the same Russia to one degree or another. And that was before that. And what they say today is to do this. It is not done in order to help someone in any way. Everyone proceeds from their own interests. If today Europe trades, for example, with Russia, why don't they close with uranium? Even France, they have 56 nuclear reactors. That is, they proceed from their own interests. This suggests that they are thereby helping Russia against Ukraine, as they did before. If you approach it this way, why are they doing it today? This is another question. Because they proceed from their own interests, and not from the interests of Ukraine. And China proceeds from its own interests. Therefore, let's leave these propaganda clichés and just watch the show. The SCO is money, and everything else is money. And the European Union is also money. And when the European Union allocates packages to you, or some country slows down, the same Orbán slowed down, gave him 10 billion, went out to drink tea. For 10 billion, he drank tea. You know, a very good tea for 10 billion. So it's all money. And in general, everything that is happening on the planet today is, first of all, a problem of money. Therefore, you can put ideological clichés at the forefront, which, for example, the President of Russia says, related to Ukraine. But these are ideological clichés. Today there is a struggle for logistics, for geography. And the West gave Russia opportunities. And I fully agree with the President of Turkey when he says, it is the fault of the West. And who created this monster over the past 20 years? Who helped Russia build these muscles today? The same West that has been making money with him for 20 years.
I want to ask about the struggle between China and Russia. Do you see the ground for this? Indeed, you can look at the study that over the past year, China has increased investment in the countries of Central Asia by 89 billion, and, thus, it has ousted Russia, in fact, from the place of the main trading partner of this region. Do you think there is a place for competition or hostility here?
No, leave the word enmity aside. Competition, yes, there is. For example, Kazakhstan is a clear example of this. Kazakhstan has, look, a large border with Russia. In Kazakhstan, almost half of the population is Russian-speaking. Kazakhstan was very closely connected with the Soviet Union and Russia. And today's Kazakhstan is a completely different Kazakhstan. And remember the events in Kazakhstan more than a year ago, and this has never happened before, when Russian troops came, and 10 days later, with a call from Beijing, they left. It means that Beijing has so much influence in this country, among other things. And the fact that the SCO was there now, everyone says that Xi Jinping came there for the SCO. Xi Jinping, first of all, came on a state visit to Astana. It was a state visit, so you will notice how it was received. Not like everyone else. It was a state visit, this is a protocol. But Kazakhstan today is #1 for China in Central Asia. Kazakhstan is a key country, and not only Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan as well, and therefore, with these countries today, China's capabilities are quietly displacing Russia's. And there is no other way, as Russia weakens, there is no such thing as a holy place, which means that someone else will go there. In this geography, there is no other country besides China. Therefore, this is quite natural, but it will not lead to enmity. It's just a competition. This is just competition, and you will have to reckon with it. And Russia, as you can see, takes this into account. Russia can attack anyone very strongly, but even China, when it allows itself something that the Kremlin does not like, in the Kremlin media or in Peskov's comments, you will never hear such an anti-Chinese harshness, because this is China.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yunus, for your time, for your analysis today, and thank you for supporting my country.
Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to our heroes, friends, and I also urge you, please, to support our country and our army in the first place, because what will happen tomorrow depends only on them. As I said, the collection is under this video in the description. Please join us. Thank you.